who is a fiction writer and the new Guernica fiction editor. And he was just in the Best American Short Story. So congratulations. And he's working on a fantastic novel himself. And right next to him is Kate McKean, who has her own book out called Right Through It, An Insider's Guide to Publishing and the Creative Life. And she made the mistake of saying as an agent that she not only does fiction and nonfiction, she does kids' books also. So I'm like, okay, now you're never going to get rid of me because she can answer all questions, which is fantastic. Jiwon Choi is a poet whose work I admired for a long time from Hanging Loose Press, and her new book is called A Temporary Dwelling. And it turns out she's not only a poet, but she's now an editor at Hanging Loose, which is a fantastic poetry imprint that I've known about for decades. So all my students are always asking me about publishing poetry. So I stole her for the panel. And right here is Ryan Harbage, who was my agent who sold 5 impossible to sell books, including a novel that took so long from start to finish that instead of a book launch, it got a book mitzvah. And another book, an addiction book that everybody rejected in the world. Oh, it started out as a memoir, and Ryan said, this would be better as a self-help. Helped me fix it, sold it to a tiny little press, and then became New York Times bestseller. So, and he does fiction and nonfiction also. Anyway, so, and thanks to DeMarcus for taping this, and Tom McDonald for having us at this beautiful store. And everybody make sure that you buy books here. And you're only allowed to buy books at a real bookstore, because otherwise we won't have any. Anyway, so I think you guys know the drill, but so I'm going to ask some questions to the editors and agents, and then I see a lot of writers here and some great editors. So I'm going to open it up for you guys to ask questions also. But okay, why don't we start with William? Okay, so one of the things that I always say to my students is that 3 pages can change your life. And even if you have a book idea, it's obviously going to be a lot easier to sell 3 pages than 300 pages. And so I always say, why don't you try to start publishing something small first? And that could be fiction or nonfiction. So William, as the fiction editor at Guernica, could you talk about how would one, if somebody wrote a short piece of fiction, how would one start to try to publish it?
Yeah, sure. Well, at Guernica, we publish fiction with a global perspective. I think the sweet spot for Guernica is about 5,000 to 7,000 words. Yeah, and I think it's important for a young writer to start cultivating their voice, refining their philosophy of craft, and publishing short pieces, either articles, in pitching them. Like Sue gives this wonderful class on pitching, and I think these are just good opportunities to get your name out there, to build confidence. Yeah, and I think that leads to other things.
And you have a submittable at Guernica, right?
Yeah, you submit on Submittable, and you can go to the Guernica website to find that.
And I think I've had some students that have published fiction there and also book reviews. Do you guys still do that?
So we do have book reviews. We also publish nonfiction, poetry. We're trying to start an audio section, so that's coming up this year. That should be exciting. But yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, and once you have not only published some short pieces, but once you have either a full manuscript of fiction or a proposal ready, then you can go to literary agents. So Kate, could you talk a little bit about how if somebody has a project, a book project, at what point should they contact you and how could they get in touch with you? Like, do you have a website or are you on manuscript wish list?
Yeah. I think the right time to approach an agent is if you're writing fiction, you have written the whole thing, and then you have addressed everything that you need to address. So if that little voice inside of your head is saying, chapter 3 is a little slow, go fix that because you're right. And you don't want me to come back to say, oh, I really like this, but chapter 3 was too slow, so I'm going to move on because maybe I don't have time to help you editorially. So you're like, oh, I knew that. So that's when you know you're done editing a longer piece. If you're writing shorter, if you're writing nonfiction, you can write a nonfiction book proposal. They are easier because they're shorter, but they're more intensive with research. And there are many, many, many resources online and in books to find out how to do that. And you can reach agents through their personal websites. All of them will have submission guidelines, and they're going to all be different because we want to drive you crazy. It's our actual goal is to make it difficult. But really the thing is that like I need something and like Ryan needs something different to decide what we want to take on as agents. And so you have to follow all those submission guidelines. I accept queries through a website called Query Tracker. But some agents have a just a inbox, a submission inbox, or they take it to their personal email. So you just have to do the research and find us.
Great. Okay. And Ryan, since we're talking about agents, so how do people find you if they have a project? And Ryan has sold so far 14 books by students and former students, fiction and nonfiction.
Thanks for asking. So I'm really bad at being findable because I'm a bit of a technophobe. So I'm not on any of the query trackers, submittable. I don't do any of that stuff. But I do have an email address that is submissions@fisherharbage.com, which is the name of my company with no hyphen, fisherharbage.com. And I usually invite people to send a one-page query letter and the first 5 or 10 pages of their manuscript, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And we do read all of those emails. So.
And when should somebody contact you? I mean, just for an example, I have students that get in Modern Love. Emilio just got a great piece in New York Magazine. So Chloe got in like the Atlantic and Washington Post. So a lot of times when people have big clips, it seems like all of a sudden editors and agents get interested. So if somebody has a couple great clips, are they allowed to go to an agent, or should they really wait until they have like a full 50-page proposal?
Yeah. So what Kate said is totally true. The best time to go to an agent is when your proposal's done or your novel's done, like really done. However, Sue is really, really smart to direct people to publish pieces, because what's great about publishing a piece, especially if it's in a marquee publication like the ones Chloe and Emilio were just in, oftentimes agents and editors will come to the writer, which is really nice because you can write, a 1,000-word book proposal in the form of an article instead of a 50-page book proposal. And most agents, if you have some serious clips, will talk to you about your book before you have a manuscript or a proposal, if you have like some real tangible accomplishments out in the world.
Cool. And Jiwon, maybe you could talk a little bit about Hanging Loose, because I think with editors at Simon & Schuster and Morrow and Random House, you usually have to go through a literary agent. But I think my editor from Heliotrope is here, Naomi Rosenblatt. And I think when you're dealing with Heliotrope or Hanging Loose Press, sometimes can you submit work directly without a literary agent?
Thanks for that good question. We are going to be 60 years in September. So we are definitely the little engine, the little train that could. Definitely we don't require any agents, and we probably would prefer not to work with agents. We would prefer just to work with you, the writer and the poet and the artist. So our process is very old school. We don't look at any full manuscripts unless we've gotten to know you. So our secret really is relationships and building a relationship with our writing community. And that's what we've been known for 60 years, is really developing close relationships and also uplifting emergent writers, maybe writers who are not deemed commercially viable. For whatever reason the market has set up. So for us, you just send us your work through the snail mail, and then we'll respond to you. And if we think your work is a good fit for the press, we'll invite you to send a manuscript. And I read everything that comes in. I still believe in the slush pile, and that's how I was found. I was found in the slush pile myself. So that really is our process. It's not, very exciting. It's not a very exciting process, but we do the work and we're committed to poetry and writing.
Now, do you guys have a magazine, or is it an anthology? Because I think you publish other things aside from
God, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, tell us about it.
Yes, we do 2 magazines a year. We are up to issue 118. It just came out. And we're always reading. So it's a rolling submissions. We are doing email submissions January and June of this year. So you can go to our website or just go to our Instagram and find that information. But we do always have a section in the magazine for high school writers because we know that high school writers and young writers are so talented and vivacious and super smart. And we always do an art folio by a living artist. We have a wonderful art editor who always looks for people who are working now. And it's exciting to see the process. So yes, we do publish our magazine twice a year, and we maybe get up to 6 books a year. And then we'll be coming out with an anthology for the 60th anniversary in the fall. So we are pretty busy.
Is it only poetry, or have you also done fiction or nonfiction?
We do fiction. We did Caroline Haygood's novel.
Right.
So we're going to do Tony Toll's updated bio memoir coming out. So we do some prose and some I guess fiction and nonfiction, but primarily we are a poetry press, at heart. So, and that's where my heart lies as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay. So Nick, tell us about the kind of books that you're doing at Simon & Schuster. And I'm jealous you had a Barbie book on the front page of the book review.
Yeah, I work at One Signal Publishers at Simon & Schuster, which is a serious nonfiction imprint. I kind of say we're like the lefties in nonfiction publishing now. There are a few imprints out there that do this kind of work, but it's much more limited than it was in the past. And hopefully, I think we believe there'll be a kind of response to what's happening in the world right now, politically and socially, kind of help us get our books out there and the messaging directed toward that audience who need it.
So people are coming, they have to go through a literary agent to get to you?
Yeah, I would say, on our list, probably 9 of 10 books are through an agent, even more than honestly. Barbie actually was pitched by me initially, but it's unusual to do that, honestly.
But I have heard you say that sometimes you'll see a piece in a newspaper or magazine and you'll reach out to the author because you think there might be a book in it. So what are you reading that might, is it just the New York Times or the New Yorker, or are there other?
Those big outlets do get more attention, obviously, but I'm on Twitter or X. I'm on Instagram. I'm kind of reading what's like hot and what's kind of popping up in my feeds. LinkedIn, I see a lot of pitches going out to that venue. But it's really kind of everywhere now. We have to be really active as far as trying to scout things out in the media.
Very cool. So Rachel, I think you said you're doing more fiction now than nonfiction, right?
I am still doing more fiction than nonfiction, although I do have a percentage of my list that's nonfiction, and for that, I think I'm a lot like Nick in that I occasionally will read something and approach the author, and if the author doesn't have an agent, I usually help them get one. I've got sort of 2 projects right now that I've been kind of working with the author for months and months and helping them get an agent, and they were just projects that caught my eye. One was I read a piece in the Washington Post, and one was something that I heard about from a British writer friend who's in a writing group on Facebook. So things can kind of come to you all different ways, but most of the time it really is from literary agents, and all the fiction is from represented authors.
And do you agree with usually if you want to do a novel, whether it's any kind of novel, you have to write the whole thing? But if you're doing nonfiction, you could sell that on a proposal?
Yes, I buy almost everything nonfiction on proposal and everything that's fiction with a complete manuscript, unless maybe it's an author who's been published quite a bit and I know their work well, in which case, I don't really need proof that they can write. And in those cases, maybe I'll buy on a partial.
And how long are the proposals? Because I used to do 100-page proposals, and I got some stupid annoying and sold books on 40 pages. So does it just depend on the topic or the platform the person has?
I think it does, but I also would say that you, like most things in life, you get out of it what you put into it. And so I really, really hate getting like a 5 to 10 page proposal, because you're actually asking me to go to the other people within the company from whom I get the money, because it's not my money. And they're going to ask a lot of questions about whether this is a good bet for us. And if you can't do better than 5 to 10 pages, I think it's really hard. And even if you have like a modern love, I want an overview of what the book's going to be about. Like, it's great that you've written a solid 1,000 words, but there needs to be more of it than that. So I wouldn't be mad at a 100-page proposal, but, for me, like maybe 50 pages is kind of a really good, solid proposal. I don't know. What do you think?
I agree, and again, I'll echo what you said. I have to pitch my stuff to 10 other people in the company, and they want to see a sample. They want a fully fleshed out outline, even sometimes. And if I sit there to begin with, I have to get it done on my own, basically. So it helps to have more material come in.
And by the way, I did an event with the Modern Love editor, Dan Jones, yesterday. 300 books have come out of Modern Love. So it's really a great place to, it's 1,500 words. So it's really interesting to start that short. Okay, so here's one of my favorite questions I want to ask everybody. What should we not do? And I have a list of emails that editors never finished reading, which is like the ones that start out, though I'd never read your publication. Another one is somebody that sends in work on Tuesday and on Wednesday leaves a phone message saying, "Did you read it yet? Did you read it yet?" So, William, what would make you feel like I'm never going to work with this person?
Oh my goodness. Maybe somebody who doesn't read the submission guidelines. Sometimes I get queries from people who find my email, and they'll write to me, and they'll say like, "You have to read this now." And there's a process that you go through submittable. My reader team reads it, and I'm beholden to my team, and so I don't get to make the final decision. My entire team has to like vote on everything, and so to ask to accelerate that is difficult at times, and so impatience is something that's tricky. Not being a good literary citizen is always something that's a turnoff. Be kind, be generous. I think that's the best thing you can do to help your case.
What's weird is that there's these form pitch letters that I see sometimes that are so egomaniacal that are like, "I'm sure your publication will love my new brilliant book," and I'm like, "Oh my God, I would never."
That's my pitch.
I would always be so much more humble, and I would say, it would be an honor if you would consider it. So do you agree that humble is the way to go when you're pitching an editor?
I think so. I think like treating, you're trying to charm the person that you want to work with. You want them to consider working with you. So treating it like how Dan said yesterday, like an offering, right? I think that's important.
Great. Yeah. And Kate, tell us some of the mistakes that people are making to agents. Agent friend Aaliyah did an event, and she said she got a letter where the first thing the person said is that their book was a combination of Joan Didion and Anthony Bordeaux, and she just felt like, I'm not even going to read this.
Oh yeah.
So comparing yourself to famous people probably isn't the way to go.
The bigger the famous person is, the less likely it's going to apply. Or if a lot of people use the best-selling books all time as their comps. They're like, well, I've written a children's book with a wizard in it, therefore it is just like Harry Potter. And you're like, great, I actually don't want that, thanks. But it's very much on the extremes that are the biggest turnoffs, because I'll get ones that's like, you're probably not even going to read this, and I'm like, okay. Thanks. Do I have to read this now? Thanks. Okay. Or like, you wouldn't know a good book if it, et cetera. And okay. I get that querying is frustrating and you want to take it out on agents. Like, that's fine. I can take it, but it's not who I want to work with. And then the other side is like, well, this is obviously going to be a bestseller. I'm going to win the Pulitzer. Like, it's going to be made into a movie. And like, I have a friend who like lives near LA. He can get it to somebody's hands. I'm like, okay, we are 50 billion years away from that. Like, what is your book about? That's what I want to know first and foremost.
Cool. Okay, Jiwon, are poets crazy too? Like, what kind of submissions? They're probably crazier. So what kind of submissions do you get that would make you feel like, I don't want to deal with this person?
I think I'm lucky in terms of everything is still coming at me on paper. And it takes people time to really write out on paper versus sending something online. So I think people do think a little bit more about what they're sending in when they have to write it, they have to print it, and they have to take it to the post office and spend like $1,000 on postage because the rate keeps going up. So I think I'm spared, except for when people do send in full manuscripts, which I still don't understand, because that means that person did not read the guidelines. And when I'm sending in work, why would I not read the guidelines so I'm not wasting your time, right? And my time. So I think definitely read carefully and don't ignore when I ask you not to staple your work. Like, I really mean don't staple your work. So yeah, those are just like things that you can do to save yourself time and the editor and the publisher time as well. I do just want to say that I have a lot of empathy for people sending in work because I'm also sending in work, right? And I didn't tell you this, but I'm probably like learning more than I'm actually teaching right now on this panel, because I'm a very new editor, and so I'm evolving sort of my idea and my sort of expertise on how to work with poets and writers. But definitely be kind, I think, is very important, because I try to be as kind as I can when I'm reading your work.
Great, but reading the instructions, and also read the publication. It shocks me because I'm teaching, and so students are sending me pitch letters, and sometimes I get, emergency, you have to give me all the editors that you know from the New Yorker. I have this hot story. What's the story? My boyfriend broke up with me, and you wouldn't believe what happened. I'm like, have you ever read the New Yorker? Like maybe a shouts and murmurs if you could like fictionalize, in 500 words the crazy thing that happened. But yeah, read the guidelines. And when you say guidelines, is it on the website? It explains to you how to pitch you?
Yeah, I mean, the guidelines are very straightforward. Again, we're very old school. We're not asking for anything very fancy. We don't even ask you to send a cover letter if you don't want to. If you want to send one, that's fine, but it's not necessary. So yes, it's very, very straightforward what's on the website. We will try to upload examples of work because we are such an old press and we're slow. That's something, we also have to like get with the time. So we will do better uploading samples of work. But again, because there's 5 editors, it's always going to change. It's never one issue it's never going to be the same as the next issue. But yes, definitely reading the magazine is important.
Well, Ryan, does anything come to mind with any people that are submitting work to you and just alienating you right away?
Well, I guess the most important thing that I can say about this is that I oftentimes feel tonally that writers have this impression that asking an agent to read their query letter and their pages is some kind of favor. Like, they feel like they're putting me out. And I hope that you all know that when you're sending your pages to an agent or an editor, you're offering them an opportunity. I make my living by representing writers. It's a privilege to represent writers. It's not putting me out to read a submission. So I feel very lucky and honored when someone sends me a submission. I do like it when they know who I am and it's slightly personalized. Like I got one today that said, "Oh, I'm sending this to you because you represent Jiwon Straddle, who is not only a wonderfully nice person, but a fantastic writer." So I'm like, and not super famous. So I'm like, oh, this person might know what they're talking about. So personalization, I think, helps, but not all of my agent colleagues agree.
Now, I get a lot of students that, again, but I get a lot of, damn, the goddamn agents aren't paying any attention to me. They're not really open for new material. This is ridiculous. I should just self-publish. I'm like, how long did you send it for? Like 2 weeks. And I haven't heard back. Oops, do you know that most agents take like 6 to 8 months before they back to you? So give us a time frame. And is there anything that someone could do if they get cap it faster? I mean, one of these is why I love clips, as I always say to students, if they could figure it out, if you submit your work to Fusion, then since you're waiting, go publish a great piece so they can follow up by say, hey, did you see my Law Street Journal piece on the same topic? That's a good way to follow up. But what's a realistic time frame? Because it's not fast.
It's hard to say. I mean, I feel like if you're sending a query letter, maybe an appropriate amount of time to follow up is 3 or 4 weeks. And what I suggest people do is resend the query letter. I often get these emails that say, hey, did you see my query letter? And I'm like, what? I don't know who this is. I don't know what it's about. There's no indication of what the book is. So I always suggest forwarding the original query letter and saying, hey, just bumping this up to the front, hoping you see it. Polite, courteous. I do think that the best way to follow up with an agent is to say, if you do, that you have an offer from another agent for representation. That's what really gets agents' attention. Short of that, publishing a piece in the New York Times or the Washington Post or something will also get agents' attention. And that, like Sue said, is a brilliant way to follow up.
And what about everybody's talking about Substack? So like if you get, and I have a couple students that have done newsletters. So on the guy, yeah, one student has a post who had 80,000 subscribers on from newsletter, and she was able to get a bit pretty quick as a paper manor house. So is that a way to set up procedures?
My book came out of my newsletter, Agents and Books, which was previously hosted on Substack, but now it's on Ghost. And I didn't have a huge following. I think I had maybe 15,000 subscribers when we sent the proposal out with my agent. And what I think made it work was that I had this very specific thing to say, which was, this is how to get your book published, and this is why it feels horrible. And like this, and like all the bad feelings, or all of the scared and anxiety and all the stuff that comes along with it is normal. So it was kind of, I wanted to say those two things at the same time, instead of being like, oh, well, hey, I've got some followers, I'm an agent, here's the stuff I wrote down on a page. And that was the most important thing. But I came to that idea by writing the newsletter, because I had to write down what I thought to find out what I thought. And I got response from my readers of the things that they wanted to hear about more, and that's what molded the book. So you don't have to have a newsletter to get a book deal. It is one way to figure out what you want to say, but it has to be a book no matter what. And your newsletter has to be a newsletter that someone has to have a reason to read, because it's like cool random things, I think sometimes is like not a fun newsletter to read unless you're already somebody cool and interesting.
Well, all right, so if you're getting nonfiction proposals that already are avided, and yet I still read from editors that there's a lot of mistakes that people make. One of the ones that I think is most interesting is I have a lot of editor friends who have said that people don't realize that the overview, which is usually the first thing if you read when you start a proposal, has to be as brilliant as looking as the page. A lot of times people do sort of a perfunctory summary of what the book is. Do you notice that? And is that addicting to pay attention to?
I agree, certainly. I think the issue is, as I said earlier, when we're in-house, we're really pitching the headline to people over and over again. We might get to a stage where we're reading the material more deeply, and that's kind of like when we're down the road a bit. But that first step is really requiring like a very like in-your-face headline, neon sign version of the pitch for me to like communicate to my people at that point. So I agree, certainly.
And what else have you seen, Ron? So we talked about and proposal. There's about 8 different sections of the proposal. And you already mentioned the comparable titles that are too famous. I know a lot of times people do comparable titles that are too old or that are in a different genre. So within 3 years, people say you're the best cops, right?
Yes, and I think all those things you mentioned kind of speak to the fact of like, does this person understand the market right now? And it's always changing, obviously. It's changed a lot in the last 3-4 years, especially, I would say. And if the author is coming to us with a sense of not having studied the market or not knowing how to write for an actual reader, not just themselves, it's a bad sign. So,
hey, Rachel, what kind of mistakes are you seeing that will make you just not want to buy a book? And you're doing a lot of fiction. Mm-hmm. So what mistake is those kind of these?
It's actually some of the same things we're talking about for nonfiction, the kind of over-promising, choosing. I don't want you to compare the book to Colleen Hoover. I think, people will sort of overpromise. Your book is not going to be the next Where the Crawdads Sing. And when people overpromise that way, to me, sort of like what Nick said, it says that like you don't really understand how your work is positioned in the market. Maybe you are writing for the same kind of readership broadly as someone like Colleen Hoover, but her audience is really, really, really broad. So that's actually not going to be helpful to me in terms of visualizing what's really good and unique about your book and your writing that's going to get me excited. So yes, it's comps that really overpromise. comps that are too old, unless don't tell me it's the next Bridges of Madison County, unless you want to tell me that it's like a real updated Bridges of Madison County. That might actually, some of those things, if someone's like, my book like reboots Bridget Jones for the next year, like I might be kind of interested in that. But if you're saying that kind of thing, that tells me you've actually given some thought about what kind of book it is and how it's positioned in the marketplace. So it's the same kind of thing. We're all looking to sell the books, whether it's fiction or nonfiction.
Yeah, one of my students pitched her book as a Latino lesbian Great Gatsby. So
I love that.
Time that I've ever heard Great Gatsby used as a comp. I'm interested in it. Great. Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll open it up. What's the best advice that either you've gotten yourself or that you could share with a group of people that, raise your hand if you have a book. Raise your hand. Yeah, so almost everybody in the audience has a book in them. So William, I know that you're publishing your own short stories. You went to Iowa and now you're teaching at NYU. So what advice either helped you or do you give to your students that they get this help in?
Yeah, great question. Definitely read widely, read outside of your own experience. Sometimes where my students read too much to corroborate like a certain kind of belief that they think that they need reinforcing. Read the opposite, right? And be surprised, right? That kind of surprise can lead to new material. And I think I think that's really important. Reading widely, revise, prepare to revise a lot. Be patient with your revisions. Sue said she worked on a novel for about 13 years. I have a short story that I've been working on for 15 years. Sometimes things are just going to take longer, but this is a labor of love, and we're all in this, to fall in love with the work that we're doing. And so, yeah.
Kate, what kind of advice do you give as a literary agent to
It's kind of piggybacking on that. Publishing is a long game, and nothing happens quickly, and that's the normal part. That not getting an agent right away is normal. Not selling your first book is normal. Taking 3 or 4 years to write another book is normal. Like all of this is fine, and it is not the best feeling, but it's just a feeling, and you can get over that, and that will help you actually get to where you want to go. It took me 7 years to get a book deal with my agent after having been an agent myself for more than a decade. So, it is okay if you're sending out your second book to agents and you didn't get one the first time around. That's normal.
I should go always says feelings missing core. Jiwon, so what kind of advice now? And obviously poetry is really hard. It's hard to publish poetry. It's hard to get a book deal. Once you get a book deal, it's hard to sell them. So what advice do you get to aspiring poets?
I think we're specifically poised, Hanging Loose is poised to really not think about the market so much because we know we're not going to make any money. So we really don't have anything to lose. And I really think that that's the point of your art, right? Your art is who you are. And so I would definitely, if you have not read Carl Phillips's Mystery is My Trade, I would definitely read it. I'm on my third time reading this book. And what I'm learning from it is to really not just be a better editor, but just a better literary citizen myself. Because if I'm expecting work from good literary citizens, I also need to be one myself. So I definitely, I love what Carl Phillips writes about love really being the most important part of writing and how he wants to be loved for who he is and the person that he is, not who I think he should be. And I think that's what I try to do as a publisher and a writer and an editor. So my biggest, I guess, advice is just to really write who you are. Don't try to write like someone else because that's not going to be good. And it's true. It's going to take time. It's just going to take the time that it takes. But good luck. And everyone has a story that's important to share. So that's really, I think, the most important thing is to write who you are.
Yeah, I'll tell a little story about something that happened to me, which will lead into a question from Ryan, which is I've been trying to sell a book for 7 years and had no luck. And I was complaining to my shrink and manical depressed and soaking and jumping and coking it up and totally fucked up. And I had two friends that got big book deals, one fiction and one nonfiction. And I was complaining about that to the Strumpel. What do they have? I don't do a lot, just jealous and angry. And he said, why don't you take them out to lunch or dinner and ask advice and see what they did, something that you didn't do. So I said, okay. So I took my friend Yona out to lunch. She's got a big novel deal. And I said, is there any advice you could give me? She said, okay, I'm going to tell you a secret. After I finished my novel, I paid a great ghost editor who works at Doubleday, this woman Sally, to go over it. I worked with her on it. And as a ghost editor, she kind of kicked it into shape. And I was able to get a book deal. Oh, interesting. I take Larry out to dinner. He just got it with nonfiction deal. And I asked him and I told him my story. And he said, okay, just between us, there's this really great ghost editor named Sally who I use. And she kicked my manuscript into shape. And that's how I sold it. So I got in touch with Sally, and she's at $2,000 or something. And I went to my my shrink. I'm like, too expensive. I can't deal with this. He's like, are you an idiot? Like, you just took two people out to lunch and dinner, and they used the same ghost editor. Like, go teach another class, or So I did. I taught another class, and I paid for the ghost editor, and have a British deal for Man and House, and within a year, the same editor bought 3 books. So I swear by those. Which is, if you can afford it, what that means is that you could pay an expert in the field behind the scenes to go over your work and give you feedback and advice. And the reason I'm saying that is because on the side, Ryan's secret is out. He's a great ghost editor. So if you don't mind, Ryan, in fact, I actually remember the speech reading, and that was the first time I showed it to you. We were doing ghost editor. So could you talk about what's the benefit of working with a ghost editor? And if somebody gives you a book, like an agent isn't necessarily going to say, this is 30% there. Here's what's wrong with it. I'm giving you notes. I'm going to fix it. But a ghost editor could. So could you talk a little bit?
Sure. What year was it that you paid $2,000 to the editor?
2002.
Okay, just checking. So I think that's great advice. And I was going to say something along these lines with the question before, which is like, what can you do? And I think the best thing any writer can do is build community. And whether that community is in a writer's group or an MFA program or with people you meet here, to share your work with as many people as possible is the smartest thing you can do. And, just like getting advice from a friend is different than getting advice from a therapist. I think working with an editor, a freelance editor, Sue says ghost editor, is a really great way to get your work as strong as it can be. And so, like, for me as an agent, I'm getting thousands of submissions a year, and I just don't have time to diagnose the problems with the book and explain to people what they need to do and invite them to resubmit to me. But, my side hustle, because I have 2 kids in private school, is I do this editing thing. And it's, I think, often really helpful and productive for people, because having been an editor at big publishers for 10 years and having my agency for 20 years, like, I sort of know a little bit my way around a book and can give people advice in a way that sometimes friends can't. I feel like friends often just want to encourage and support each other. Like, oh, your book is great. It's so awesome. But, when someone comes to me and asks for help, I try to get very, very real and very specific.
Cool. Rachel, what kind of advice do you give to aspiring authors who are about to work with big publishers?
I think some of it, sort of to echo what William said, is read very widely, know what else is out in the market, know what your book is like and who your book is for. And also, just echoing, be a good literary citizen. Don't be an asshole. Don't bash other people on social media. Because I do sometimes, I will get proposals, or an author will sort of be on submission to me, and I'll be like, oh, I remember that Twitter thread, and it tells me a lot about what that person's going to be like to work with in some ways, but also just how that person relates to other writers in the business of writing. And it's just kind of, in some ways, we're all each other's colleagues, and you don't want to be the colleague from hell. So there are definitely writers out there who are bestsellers who I will not work with when their agents bring them around because of that. So, and overall, just keep going and write what brings you joy. And if one thing doesn't work, it's totally okay to give it up and start something new. If you feel the spark of inspiration, because I also do see people who I know are really talented, really try and work a single thing to death, especially in fiction where maybe it's just not working, but they keep thinking that if they just sort of sweat over it a little more, it'll work. It's okay to move on and do something different and be inspired by something different.
Yeah, someone once told me that there's 1,000 people in publishing who all know each other, and if you're a jerk to one, everybody's gonna know.
Yeah, if you were really shitty to your editor at one house, when your agent brings you around, we have all talked about it. Yep.
Good. Okay, Nick. So, what advice do you give to aspiring nonfiction authors?
I really think the knowledge that we are publishing not just an idea or a book, it's you. It's your entire profile. And that goes as far as like telling us every contact you've had, every connection you've had, every writer's workshop you've done, your entire CV is everything. Even to this day, I have books coming out this year or last year where I'll have a monthly meeting with an author, a weekly meeting with an author, and every time I'm saying, "Hey, like, we're doing your press now. Like, tell us your contacts." And no matter what, they'll say things at the last second that was the person at the New York Magazine they knew for years. They don't tell us at the last second. It's like, I can't believe you didn't tell us this, but won't work with it. But like, value your experience and value your contacts and the people you've met and bring it all to the plate. That was for, I think, an agent also, but for editors, especially important.
And I don't think a lot of new authors understand how much work you really have to do on your own, right?
Yes. And that's, again, just developing contacts, relationships, and bring it all to us because we can't act on it. We don't know about it.
Yeah, can I say something about that? Because this comes up with a lot of authors, and people will sort of say like, "Oh, especially for fiction writers, like, do I need to be on social media? Do I need to like build a platform of followers?" And I would say probably not. Like, I don't really care if the novelists I publish are, have big Substack followings, although it's not bad if they do, but it really helps to be that citizen in the literary community, both because I think spiritually it's very nourishing for most writers to sort of have a community of other writers around them so that you can kind of like bitch to them at the end of the day and maybe not to your agent and editor, and also sort of give each other support. But then those people are going to be the people who maybe blurb your book when it comes out, or who tip you off about an agent who might be a good fit for you, or when your book gets published and you need to do an in conversation with at your book launch party. People. And I have worked with some authors who are really, really awesome, and I'm super proud to be publishing their books, but they don't do that as much. And one of the things that I've said to them is like, you need to get out there and kind of network and socialize with other writers, with booksellers, with other people, because that's going to build up your profile too. And if you don't have that, we can still publish you. But it's like a really important tool in your toolbox that you're sort of deliberately not having. And if you're really good on Instagram or TikTok, like, go nuts, because there are a lot of writers who they really are good at reaching out and connecting to their readership, and it really does help with their sales. So be open to all of that, because that's part of your career as a writer, besides just like what you put on the page these days.
And by the way, I know a poetry editor, Kahan, who I love, and she actually bought the book of a poet who is also a stand-up comic, but she liked the book and they were debating. She had 60,000 Instagram followers, and she said, I'd never met a poet that had 60,000 Instagram followers, and that carried it, and that's why they did it. So you don't have to do social media, but if you have a lot of followers, that could help, right? Yeah. All right, so we can open it up. Are there any questions? Yes?
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for this panel. The writer is very happy to see everyone here.
What's your name?
My name's Michael. I'm also an editor. I'm an MFA in writing student at Columbia. I read both publishers and Public Journal. And I wanted to ask, what would your advice be to a library who would be bullying editorial anchors in this high, especially something involving reading enough for manuscripts?
Right? Yeah.
at a big publisher, if you go on their website, they usually will give you all of the information about sort of what the editorial internships are like. Ours are seasonal, so we always have like a summer and winter session. I think most places do that, and they usually they are now almost all paid at the big publishers, as they should be. It's like a stipend, but it's not nothing. So yeah, I would like just go, because they're usually pretty specific on their website about how to do that. And then some of the independent and smaller publishers in town, you should also just stalk them around on their website, because they will probably tell you, and they may not offer as much money, but they're still probably going to offer good experience.
And by the way, I got my first job at the New Yorker through a professor at NYU. So bug your professors, go to their office hours, buy their books, have them sign their books for you, and then keep throwing out there that you're I taught at Columbia, and there's a lot of really good connections there. So because they might hear of something.
And I'm gonna regret this, but don't feel bad about reaching out to editors. I can't hire someone, but I can collect a resume and have a person on file when it does come up in the future. So, yeah.
Cool. Other questions, Emilio?
Yes, I am. What is this to is so we're dealing there more. Our mother's I associate in Pitboy. That was correct. But we know that you get a lot of submission. So what is the one thing where you get that?
Yeah, so Emilio, he said he's working on his memoir, My Mother's Five Buzzbangs, and he wants to know what would turn you off in the subject heading or in the email itself.
Oh.
Okay, so what's a big turn off?
I usually don't pay that much attention to the rote parts of a query, like the subject line. If it happens to be very good, I would obviously notice it, but usually it's like title, author, or query, or something like that. And I'm so happy to send this to you, blah, blah, blah. My eyes basically glaze over that stuff, and I'm looking for the meat of your query. I want to know what it's about. And the things that turn me off is seeing like 3,000 words, because you don't need, if it takes that long to tell me about your book, then you need to make your pitch better, or your book is too long or something like that. So I really want to know, what is your book about? What does it feel like to read it? What kind of reader are you looking for? What other books are like reads? What are the vibes of it? Not like, oh, it's going to sell as much as blah, 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 but like, if you enjoyed reading the corrections, it's going to be this. I'm just thinking of random titles here. And that's what I'm looking for. And then all of the things we said before of just being like, you wouldn't know if this was a good novel anywhere, memoir anyway. Why bother? I'm like, okay, great. I don't need to do that. So it's actually hard to get me to just write something off. It's hard to do that because I know that writing a query letter is hard, and I'm looking around all of the frippery of the query letter to the meat.
Pretty good. Good. Chloe, did you have a question?
Yeah. I was wondering if you have a previously published piece and like to include that in your proposal. Are you allowed to do that with the Monday Ezekiel if there's more? Because editorially it only gets scoping words, but if you feel like the piece can be done.
Yeah, is that the Atlantic piece?
Yeah.
What was that called again?
It was like a logo on a plus thesis is a tattoo you didn't ask for, and it's all about the prosthetics industry. Like, they stopped like to make the parts for prosthetics. They all for their logo on part, and they help because musician that was like a NASCAR vehicle because he bought like Autobot and Be Bionic,
No, that was a brilliant piece. Tell me again your essay collection. It's called
Disarm.
Disarm. That's a great question. So for an essay collection, it's always good if you publish a few pieces. But how do you include that in the proposal? Is it just a link, or can you take the essay and expand on it for the sample pages, and then let the editor or agent know that part of this entity that's primary?
I think the best way to do it is to include a PDF of the piece in the proposal. I think it isn't really asking a lot of someone to hit a hyperlink, but it's much easier for someone to actually see it if there's a PDF, and also it's more impressive. And if you have built on it in the actual essay collection itself, like if you've made it bigger and it's part of your sample work, You just have to say somewhere in the proposal, maybe the table of contents or maybe under the title, like this is an expansion of the piece that ran in the Atlantic. We all expect people to do that. You know, we know you're going to do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that.
And Nick, so you do nonfiction. So how do you prefer it? Like, because what happens is, what if she takes that essay that already ran in the Atlantic, but she wants to expand it for sample pages?
Like Ryan said, I'd have no problem with that at all. Just let us know that it's being adapted or expanded upon in the proposal materials.
Cool. You had a question also?
Yes. Allison, actually just a thing from Canada, so I'm excited to be here. I'm working on a memoir, and my question is, are there any topics that you're just so sick of hearing about that you do not want to land in your inbox anymore?
Yeah, and by the way, I will say, and my students know this, that memoirs are having a rough time right now, especially if you want a mainstream publisher. So in my book, Book Bible, I actually have a whole section called Genre Fluidity. And I admit that there were several books that I started out as memoirs that I wound up selling as other ones. In fact, Ryan was the one. I wrote a book with my addiction therapist who helped me quit cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs. And I originally thought it was going to be a memoir like Love's Executioner, and nobody was interested in a memoir. But Ryan said, but everybody wants to get off of their own addictions. And so we changed it into, it was always called Unhooked, but we changed it into Unhooked, How to Quit Anything. And that sold. And I also had a couple memoirs that didn't sell that I made into novels. So I will throw that out there. Does anybody else, in terms of memoirs, I actually have heard editors and agents who say, for example, that childhood sexual abuse, that they can't handle it. Like, does anyone have sort of topics that they can't handle or that they're not interested in?
I always hate saying these things because it's like, oh, this story isn't important anymore, you know, and that isn't true, you know, but it's that we see a lot of them, and cancer is one of them, infertility. I have seen, I might get this as an agent. I work with a lot of transgender and non-binary clients, but like, oh no, my kid is, enter this is something that I've found difficult because it's kind of like not your story. Those are some of the broad ones that I'm thinking of.
Nick, are there any topics that you're just not?
I really work to not do that when it comes to memoir. I will say that once I do that pitching internally, that might be a thing where it's like, I've heard this already. So it's going to be really special to do a memoir. I think your idea about kind of adapting memoir to a different genre makes a lot of sense. A lot of cases. We're doing a thing now. I have some books in the pipeline that are kind of look at like reported memoirs, where the reporting is put forward to kind of like help us frame for the marketplace later. So that might be an idea as well.
Great. Rachel, anything come to mind if you're looking at a memoir? Any topics that you're not interested in anymore?
I mean, I think that kind of thing is just really personal. There's things that I wouldn't necessarily like to read as a reader, so I'm probably not the right person as an editor, but that doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't be the right editor. And fortunately, there's a lot of us out there. So, you know, I would never say never. And I think sometimes what we find out is that someone has a take on it that really works, even, you know, so I wouldn't ever really want to say like, for me, a book about the death of a child would be really hard, but I have read some about the death of a child that are really wonderful, and I'm glad I read them. And so, you know, maybe I would edit those someday.
Yeah, there was that New Yorker piece about a mom. I think did she lose 2 kids?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it was really, really.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of it, you know, like The Still Point in the Turning World, which is about a woman whose child had Tay-Sachs, or, you know, things like that. Like there for everything I could say to you about, I think we're kind of over that. Someone will come along and prove me wrong. So I think that, you know, you might as well really, if it's something that you feel really passionate about, or it's like, it's your experience, you own your experience. So, you know, go for it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then, you know, like Sue said, you can turn it into a memoir. You can, you know, squeeze the juice out of it. And a novel, you can squeeze the juice out of it some other way.
And I will say with a memoir, there are so many great places that publish short essays. And I have one student that for a year, he had a great agent. For a year, nobody was interested in his piece, and she sent him to me. He sold one piece to the Washington Post, and he got $100,000 Random House deal like literally a week later. So publishing for memoir, publishing There's so many great. I mean, Modern Love has launched 300, but Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Magazine's The Cut. Remilio just got in. Chloe's been in The Atlantic. There's so many great places for first-person essays.
I will say also, a lot of my work as an editor is really finding a way to make the nonfiction pitch or idea become more personal, because the media wants that. So if I get kind of like a dead book that comes in nonfiction, my job is to make it more personal, make it more kind of unique, and feel very like a person's behind this book, not just an idea. Because the media is not as brainy as it was in the past, I'll say. You need a person to really communicate things directly.
Great. Any final questions? Yes.
I think that varies about how appetition is eating. Are the voting that the real ones that we have at LRS is part of the
What's your name? Sanibel asked about acquisitions for a publishing house. So what happens, which is really frustrating, is sometimes an editor will love a book, but then they have to go to their sales and marketing people and kind of talk them into it. So tell us a little bit about that.
Every book is its own journey, I would say. You know, in my mind, back in my mind, I feel like I have like bullets to kind of bring out each year. I have like one or two I can really push for everything. But then most things require a lot of like you would say, kind of like a broad support base to work. I've got a few I can do, but not every day.
Good, Rachel.
I feel, in my experience, it really varies according to which publisher. I mean, I've worked for several big houses in New York, and some of them, the acquisitions and editorial meetings were just the editors, and some of them there were marketing and publicity people in them, and it really depends a lot on where you're working. But in terms of whether I can buy something, I definitely want other people in the house, if it's something I'm really passionate about, particularly if it's something that's going to be a big investment of money, I'm going to want to have a pretty broad base of support and have people around me who are really interested in it. And that's going to include the editorial director and publisher. And also, when you start talking about a lot of money, usually marketing and publicity, those people don't sort of prevent me from buying things that I'm really passionate about. But just generally, you want to know that you're going to have a lot of people around you who are really excited about it, because I'm only doing one part of the publishing process. So, and it also, it varies a lot. You can also work at places where the management is just really awful, and they make it really difficult for us to buy. I don't work at that kind of place now, but I've seen that dynamic. So, I wouldn't worry too much about, like, if you have a good agent, they will try and find an edit. They are sending your thing to us because they know that it jibes with what we do well and what our house publishes well.
Cool. All right. Just to end, why don't we talk about what's exciting? So, William, you just got in the best American short stories, and I know you're working on a novel. You have a literary agent for a novel based on the short story I Love, Happy Family, and you're teaching. And what else? What's exciting now?
Yeah, I mean, we're working for Guernica, so, we would love to see more submissions there. Best American Short Stories 2025 is out now. I just got a very interesting review of one of my stories in a Substack, and so, I'm keeping an eye on this writer. And so, yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so Kate, Right Through It, An Insider's Guide to Publishing in the Creative Life. Are you still doing events for it?
Yes, I'm doing a seminar in a week or two. Oh, no, this coming week at McNally-Jackson online about demystifying the query letter. And I also have a picture book that I wrote coming out on May 5th called Pay Attention to Me. It's about a cat who wants to be famous on the internet.
And you're still doing newsletter, right?
I still write my newsletter Tuesdays and Thursdays at agentsandbooks.com.
Great. And Jiwon, congratulations again on your beautiful book, A Temporary Dwelling. And you're working at Hanging Loose. What's exciting coming up?
Well, we are going to reprint George Mosby Jr.'s Population. You probably don't know the book. It was published in 1983. He was an incarcerated poet from Virginia. And it's going to be a small reprint, but I'm excited because even though we're not going to make any money from it, I'm very passionate about the book, and and it needs to be resuscitated. And again, I mentioned we are doing an anthology for our 60th year in the fall. I also have some free copies of previous issues that I can give out for anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about Hanging Loose Press. Oh, and we also do collaborate with Queen's MFA, their translation program. We put out the Luce Prize for an MFA student who has translated a work. Our most recent one was a book in Swahili, and then we are going to do another book, a Swahili translation. So, yeah.
Cool. And Ryan, aside from ghost editing and agenting, I know Michelle Adams, The Containment, not only was on the front page of the book review, but didn't she just win a big award?
So I represent a legal scholar named Michelle Adams, and she wrote this amazing book called The Containment, all about school segregation and desegregation in Detroit in the 70s, about a big Supreme Court case. And the paperback just came out, and she's getting in all the paperback roundups and all the few remaining book reviews. And she won the Ma Stone Book Award and the Avery Cohen Prize. And I think she'll get something else here pretty soon. And Robbie Robertson's posthumous memoir, Insomnia, just came out about the 2 years that he and Martin Scorsese lived together and did a bunch of coke and did a bunch of stupid things. And that's a really fun book. And the most important thing that I can say tonight is happy birthday to Susan Shapiro, the most generous teacher on the planet Earth.
Thank you. This is my idea of a good time for my birthday. Rachel, tell us, do you have any hot books that we should go buy now?
You know, I'm really excited because I've had authors be nominated for a lot of prizes, but I just found out that a debut novel that I edited called Love and Hot Chicken, it's a very funny Southern novel, was just nominated for the Thurber Prize for American Humor Writing. And in the company of like Stephen Rowley and Shalom Auslander and a lot of like much, much more experienced writers. And I'm super excited for this author.
Great. And Nick, so your Barbie book was on the cover of the, I'm still jealous, on the book review. What else do you have that's hot that we should go check out?
If you love Barbie or hate Barbie, buy Barbie Land.
Barbie Land.
Coming up, I think I've got a couple of books next few weeks, actually. One is called Living in a Daisy Age. If you're a De La Soul fan, it's kind of like a memoir, but also kind of a historical book about that band and their impact. Then in March, I've got a book called The Freeing the Dead about the Second Seminole War, which is kind of a lost war to history in a lot of ways, where the United States actually invaded Florida and they fought, and they didn't win, but they didn't lose either. It's kind of strange. Then in April, I have a book called Our World in 10 Buildings. It's an architect's book about his craft, but also kind of how architecture can really make the world a better place, as far as equity goes and experience and like life. So, but yeah, thanks.
Awesome. And I have a lot of classes, both classes and events online and in person. And I have some flyers if anybody wants to get them. And I wanted to thank all the brilliant panelists tonight, and especially thanks to Tom McDonald and everybody at PT Knitwear for letting us have this great event. Buy books. They have great, not only books, they have great tchotchkes. So buy notebooks. They have really cool stuff around here. And thank you all for coming.